Today, we are discussing a fascinating topic and groundbreaking research that is happening right now here in Seattle about near-death experiences. And what is a near-death experience? What happens to us when we die? What happens when we die and come back? That's what we're getting into today. And joining me now is Dr. Christof Koch, who is a neuroscientist with the Allen Institute in Seattle. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you much for having me, Bill.
Okay, so let's just baseline it, if we can, off the top. What is your description of a near-death experience?
Near-death experience is an experience that people can have. Typically, they only have it once under extreme condition where typically the world disappears and they seem to enter a different world. Sometimes there's a tunnel of light or very bright light. Sometimes there's a combination of terror or awe or ecstasy, the strange combination. Sometimes it goes hand in hand with a review of your life. Sometimes there are other spirits or people in it, sometimes long lost, people that have died already many years ago. What's remarkable, they're typically, so they are out of their control. They are typically last well under an hour. And what's most remarkable is the effect that this experience has on people. Typically people, very often they will lose the fear of death and they become much more acceptance, particularly when this happens to old people or people in hospital where they know sooner or later they will die. They become much more accepting of death. So it seems to have a remarkable positive impact on them.
And you know about this firsthand, right? Because you died and then came back to life. Is that accurate and experienced an NDE?
No, so I mean, it's very difficult to say exactly when you say I died or when someone died, what does it mean when you died? Subjectively, what happened to me, the world disappeared. This was in the first week of the pandemic year. The world disappeared, my body disappeared, I disappeared. There was no Christof. There wasn't me watching what happened. There was just this consciousness that was present. What this consciousness apprehended was this bright light, this icy blue bright light of overwhelming intensity. Everything else, there was no space. Everything else was swallowed up in this singularity. There was no left, right, up, down. There was no time. It wasn't too slow or too fast. It simply was. The other thing there was terror and ecstasy. And this lasted.
Those are two very disparate emotions and feelings.
They are, except if you think about the etymology of the word awful, full of awe. And it's often used in the religious context that tremendum, mysterium tremendum. When you're in the presence of some overwhelming mystery, you have both this combination of awe, of beauty, of transcendence, but also of terror. It's not that uncommon to have both of these and combined.
So I reached out to you after I read the Washington Post did an article featuring you and the work that you're doing at the Allen Institute a short time back. The headline read, "These people experience near death. Here's how it changed their lives." So I wanted to bring you in. Took some doing to get you here, but I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm really excited to speak to you about this. When people report experiencing an NDE, some of the commonly reported phenomenon, seeing a brilliant light, as you mentioned, feeling a sense of peace, or having the sensation of leaving your body or being drawn into a tunnel. Is that what your research indicates?
Yeah, so personally, I didn't have an out-of-body experience. So again, each of these experiences has different elements. Mm-hmm. So some people have what's called an out-of-body experience, where they feel or they experience themselves floating above their body, sometimes even floating above the house and up into the atmosphere. I did not have this. Mind you, these NDEs are not that uncommon. So one study out of Holland showed that 10% of people who had an in-house cardiac arrest, that are, of course, more likely to recover than when you're having a cardiac arrest, outside the hospital, 10% of these people report NDEs. And again, you put that into context. This is one of the worst things that can happen to you. Your heart that beats your entire life, right? The heart that is you stops. So most people would think this is a terrifying experience, right? It's extremely painful. You have people then screaming at you and shooting, stuff into your body to try to revive you. Yet what's remarkable, most of these people do not have a post-traumatic experience. Instead, they have this serenity. The journalist Sebastian Junger, he's a war correspondent. 2 years ago, during the pandemic, he also had a near-death experience, and he has written this wonderful book, In My Time of Dying. Well, again, he had this, in his case, I think his dead father appeared to him, and it gives them, and he says he doesn't understand. He's non-religious. He doesn't understand. It gives him this peace that passes all understanding. And that's also been my experience. I realized after my NDE that, Bill, as you get older, it's not infrequent that you can't sleep and you lie awake at night in bed and you think about death and what's going to happen after I'm dying, that I'm really dead for a very, 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 very long time. And it gives you this existential dread, right? I've never had that since my experience again. I've lost this fear of death. So it's quite remarkable. How can these experiences provoke this radical change? Some people call it transformative experiences because it transforms your attitude to life in a major way.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to hit on. I mean, how do NDEs affect people? You described some of your experience, but how do they impact their lives moving forward? And do they make changes in their lives generally? Like, what kind of changes are made from folks after they experience an NDE?
So not all do. Some people do change life. They might change their profession. They might decide chasing the almighty dollar isn't really what life is about. They become more caring. They become more acceptance. They start, non-profit organization.
Do they fear death any longer as much generally? I mean, you said your fear of death had diminished.
It's effectively gone. I mean, I don't want to die, but yeah, I don't think about death anymore. I know it's going to happen, and that's okay. Yeah, yes. It seems to take away in many people the fear of death. The other thing to say, Bill, is that there's a larger class of experiences that people now come to recognize, not only near-death experiences, but also what's called religious conversion experiences, mystical experiences, and experiences that you can have during high-dose psychedelics like ayahuasca or magic mushroom. In all cases, what's common, you lose a sense of self. So typically, that voice inside your head, Bill, is gone during this experience. Bill is gone, but you still experience things. Very often, you're removed from your everyday surroundings. Sometimes people are there with open eyes, but they don't perceive the external world anymore. They perceive something else. Very often, it feels to them like they have access, sort of what people then call mind at large or universal or cosmic consciousness. And so their view of what truly exists also changes. They
feel like they're part of something much larger.
Much, much larger. They feel at peace, and they feel this is the heart of the universe. Suddenly, I've been there. I know now what the beating heart of the universe is all about.
And the feeling generally is positive about
it's
that.
It's very positive. They come back with this very positive effect, and it lasts. People report 20 years later that this is still one of the top 2 or 3 most meaningful experiences in their life. I mean, this is remarkable.
Can you explain, kind of take it step by step, what happens to our brain when we die?
Okay, so there are 2 related questions here. What happens during a near-death experience?
Yes.
Which, after all, is near-death.
I guess what I'm leading to is, does brain death have any correlation to a near-death experience? Like, is it synapses firing in its final moments? Is it, essentially a hallucination? Is there something more to it? I'm kind of wading into that territory.
Yeah. No, it's a very good question. It's, of course, difficult to answer because if you truly die, we don't get any report from you anymore.
Tough empirical evidence, yes.
What we do have, for instance, a study. There are a few rare studies now. I'm thinking of one out of University of Michigan that was published 2 years ago, a beautiful study, where they had people on life support that had equipped with a fully EEG montage. So EEG are these electrodes that you put outside on your skull to monitor brain waves. Mm-hmm. So they had 4 people who, for various reasons, their family decided they should be removed from life support. Okay, so they all died. These people died. Okay, what they saw in two of these people, so you pulled life support, and then it may take between 10 minutes or an hour or two for these people actually to die, to spontaneously then die, right? What they observed in two people, so the amplitude of these brain waves, typically they become weaker and weaker as you expect, as all the batteries essentially run out, the gradients run out, and you die. What they saw on two people was this very paradoxical surge in activity over the part of the cortex, the outermost layer, that we associate with seeing and hearing things, with sensory consciousness. They lasted for a few minutes and then subsided. Okay. Now, are they caused by, lots of things go wrong in the dying brain. There could be mini seizures, there could be cramp of the overlying scalp, or there could be the sign of that there is something truly going on as the brain, is literally on its last gas. It generates some activity that then maybe the person perceives as whatever they perceive.
So what led you to study near-death experiences in the first place?
So I'm a long-term student of consciousness. I've studied consciousness, read many books about them for the last 40 years, and I was really interested in them from an early age. And what's changed over the last 40 years, when I first read about them, you could only read about them in books that were typically in bookstores and library in the back end under occult sciences, witchcraft, magic, and other weird stuff. And so the community has really accepted, scientists, the medical community has accepted that these phenomena are real. So that's not in dispute anymore. They're not just crazy people or incredible religious devout people that want this to be true. Because it turns out, even when you're an atheist, you can still have a near-death experiences. When you're a young child and drowning, you can have a near-death experience. So typically what happens in near-death experiences, the brain is anoxic, because of whatever, the heart attack or the drowning, etc. And that sometimes may release some activity in the brain that then gives rise to these experiences that people then enables them to change life. It's very puzzling.
Yeah.
They're now being studied in a little bit more controlled context using psychedelic, because it turns out, as I mentioned before, that high dose of psychedelics can more reliable induce them. And it turns out, particularly in these clinical studies that are now ongoing here and in England and other places for depression and treatment-resistant depression and PTSD, the extent that patients get better correlates strongly with the extent that they report a sort of a mystical or transformative experience. So to the extent the experience, I lost myself, I lost my ego, I accessed some other outer worldly domain, to that extent people find relief from their depression and from their PTSD. And so this allows us now in a little bit more controlled way to study people while they have these mystical transformative experiences.
And moved into the science section as opposed to the occult and witchcraft section of the bookstore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's already moved into that in the sense
that
it's a legitimate phenomenon. Many people have reported it's for real.
Okay, so when you got sick and you had an experience, after having studied it for that long, what was that like for you, being an expert in the field and then having that experience personally?
Well, it also changed my outlook. It transformed my outlook into something more akin that I question. So the standard belief in the sciences in academia is what's called physicalism. It used to be known as materialism. That the only thing that truly exists in a fundamental way is matter and energy and space and time. But this seems to suggest, well, maybe that's not right, and maybe we need to return to alternative, older views. So, for example, the view of what's known as idealism that was mainstream in Western culture in the 18th and early 19th century, where you believe that everything, yes, this is real, but ultimately this physical reality is a manifestation of something more mental. The book that launched the Age of Aquarius is a book that was written in Los Angeles by Brit Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. You may have heard about it. He had this mescaline experience. He described his mescaline experience in 1948 or 51, something like that.
In Sicily, yeah.
The experience he describes in the book actually took place here in L.A. He subsequently had them elsewhere.
Yeah. He had a sanctuary out there.
Yes.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Continue, please.
In Italy. And he describes what he feels, what he accesses, what his sort of mind. He uses a very poetic term, mind at large. And he also asked, why did I have this experience? And he calls it an unearned act of grace. He isn't clear how can I trigger this? Why did this happen? He doesn't know. And he feels he accessed sort of this universal mind, this mind at large, call it cosmic consciousness. And again, that seems to give people a great amount of peace. And so now you can either take them at face value and say, okay, this is my new metaphysical view, or if you want to remain a scientist, say, okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to go into this metaphysical question, but I'm still interested. Why does it have this powerful effect? Because isn't this great if we can give this to everyone, so people are less anxious, so people don't have to be depressed, etc. So what are the conditions under which these experiences take place?
That sounds like something worth studying. Okay, I wanted to ask you something, and this is kind of personal. And this, we're getting, it's not a near-death experience, okay? But we're talking about end-of-life situations, and what I'm about to describe is something that I've read about in other situations in different ways, but this does happen. So with my mother, who passed away 7 years ago, I spent a tremendous amount of time as she was going through the end-of-life process. She was in hospice in her own home, but in the last days, she was having experiences, and the only way I could describe it is to say she was in a daze or in a trance of some sort, it seemed like, when I would catch her doing it. But one time I was sitting on the couch next to her, and there was a TV show on. I was watching the show, and I heard her say, they said I could go with them. And I looked at my mom, and she was in what appeared to be like a sort of a trance. And she was surprised that I was there. She came to, in a way, and looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I never went anywhere. I've been here the whole time. Who said you could go with them?" And she got kind of angry. It took a moment and said, "Oh, never mind, Bill." And it was like, you're not supposed to be here for that. And she experienced something. She was speaking to someone. I had a hospice minister that came by, and I ended up chatting with her for quite a while, who said that she had done a doctoral thesis on this very topic about what happens after you die. That was kind of what I was getting at. And she said, I have a theory, and she wrote her thesis on it, that it is coming back from whence we came. When we are born, we're coming out of a tunnel into a white, very bright light, into a very cold world, very different from the womb that we were nice and warm and comfortable in before, and that the dying process is the exact same in reverse. We're going back from whence we came. Do you buy into that at all?
One question, your mom passed soon after this experience?
Yeah, I would say she passed probably about 5 days after that.
Okay. Well, there's this, again, I can't comment on that. I haven't been there. But like all of us, sooner or later, this will happen to me.
She was on morphine, and I wondered if it could be some effect from the drugs.
Yeah, it's interesting because and this phenomena, I was going to mention terminal lucidity, when people in their last day or 2 or 3 suddenly become lucid again. They might remember things, until then they had difficulty recalling things, but suddenly they remember, they become more their usual self, they talk, and then they pass. And typically this phenomena happens less when you're on sedation because of pain. But there are strange phenomena that take place at the end of life when part of the brain gets released from the usual inhibition, and we simply don't understand that. I think it's the right thing to say. So I'm going, in fact, in 2 months to a workshop that specifically deals with the dying brain and what are the processes that happen there. And separate, of course, is the question of what is the metaphysical implication? What does it tell us about the world? And is about the material world, or is there things that cannot be described within the realm of physical science? So those are all things that we have to work out.
Absolutely fascinating conversation. Dr. Christof Koch, a neuroscientist with the Allen Institute in Seattle. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
A fascinating conversation.